Welcome to tonight's journey through time. Close your eyes and let yourself drift back nearly 4,000 years to a land of dusty hills and ancient valleys where one of history's most influential civilizations would emerge. The story of ancient Israel isn't just a tale of kings and prophets, of temples and conquests. It is the story of how a small group of people in a contested strip of land between deserts and seas would create a legacy that shapes our world even today. How did nomadic herders become a kingdom? What forces brought empires crashing down on this tiny nation again and again? Why did ideas born in these rocky highlands spread across continents and survive millennia? Tonight, we'll trace every step of this epic journey, from mysterious origins in Mesopotamia to the final destruction of Jerusalem's great temple. We'll walk with patriarchs and queens, fight alongside warrior judges and reluctant prophets, watch kingdoms rise from nothing and crumble into dust. The night is long, and our story spans centuries. So settle into comfort, let the modern world fade away, and prepare to witness the entire sweep of ancient Israel's extraordinary history. Our journey begins not in Canaan, but in the great cities of the ancient Near East, where one man would hear a call that changed everything. Chapter 1. The Patriarchs and the Promise. The story begins around 2000 BCE in Ur, one of the great cities of ancient Mesopotamia. Imagine the scene. Massive ziggurats rising above crowded streets, merchants hawking goods from distant lands, priests performing elaborate rituals to the moon god, Nana. In this sophisticated urban center, a man named Abram lives a comfortable life. He has wealth, status, and security. But according to tradition, he hears a divine call that demands he abandon everything familiar. The voice promises him descendants as numerous as stars, a land flowing with milk and honey, and a covenant that will make his name great among nations. This moment, whether historical fact or foundational myth, marks the beginning of the Israelite story. Abram, soon renamed Abraham, becomes a wanderer. He takes his wife Sarah and his nephew Lot, and they journey westward toward Canaan, the land bridge connecting Africa and Asia. This is no empty wilderness they enter. Canaan, in the Middle Bronze Age, is dotted with fortified cities, each ruled by local kings who owe nominal allegiance to Egyptian pharaohs. The land itself is diverse. Coastal plains perfect for agriculture, central highlands covered in forests and pastures, the deep gash of the Jordan Valley descending to the salt-laden Dead Sea. Abraham and his family become semi-nomadic pastoralists, moving seasonally with their flocks, camping near cities but not settling in them. They're not conquerors but sojourners, negotiating for grazing rights and water access. The biblical narrative paints Abraham as both deeply faithful and profoundly human. He lies about Sarah being his sister to protect himself in Egypt. He fathers a son, Ishmael, with Sarah's servant Hagar when his wife seems unable to conceive. Then, in old age, Isaac is born to Sarah, creating a family dynamic fraught with tension. The story of Abraham being commanded to sacrifice Isaac on Mount Moriah becomes a pivotal moment, demonstrating absolute devotion when he's willing to give up even the son through whom all promises were supposed to flow. Isaac continues his father's pastoral lifestyle, and his son Jacob adds another layer to the founding narrative. Jacob, whose name means heel grabber or supplanter, lives up to his reputation by deceiving his father to steal his brother Esau's birthright. He flees to Mesopotamia, works for his uncle Laban, and through cunning and determination accumulates wives, children, and wealth. His wrestling match with a divine being at the Jabbok River results in a new name, Israel, meaning one who struggles with God. This renaming is crucial because Jacob's 12 sons become the ancestors of the 12 tribes of Israel. The patriarchal narratives are more than family stories. They're establishing territorial claims, tribal relationships, and religious identity. When Abraham purchases the cave of Machpelah as a burial site, he's making a legal claim to the land. When Jacob erects standing stones and names sacred sites, he's creating a religious geography. These stories explain why certain locations are holy, why certain tribes are related but distinct, why the Israelites see themselves as chosen for a special destiny. The era ends with Joseph, Jacob's favored son, whose brothers sell him into slavery in Egypt. Through a series of reversals worthy of any epic, Joseph rises to become Pharaoh's chief administrator. When famine strikes Canaan, Jacob's family migrates to Egypt, where Joseph settles them in the land of Goshen. This migration sets the stage for the next great chapter in Israel's story. The biblical text presents this as divine providence, God bringing his people to Egypt, not as an ending, but as preparation for something greater. Chapter 2. Bondage in Egypt and the Exodus. The book of Exodus opens with an ominous line. Now there arose a new king over Egypt, who did not know Joseph. Generations have passed. The Israelites have multiplied in Goshen, and Egyptian authorities grow nervous about this large foreign population in their midst. The Pharaoh, unnamed in the biblical text but possibly one of the powerful rulers of the new kingdom, enslaves the Israelites, forcing them into brutal labor on construction projects. They make bricks without straw, build storage cities, suffer under taskmasters' whips. The oppression grows so severe that Pharaoh orders all Hebrew baby boys thrown into the Nile River. Into this darkness, Moses is born. His mother hides him for 3 months, then places him in a waterproof basket among the reeds of the Nile. Pharaoh's daughter discovers the baby and adopts him, raising him in the Egyptian court. The irony is perfect. The future liberator of Israel grows up as an Egyptian prince. Moses receives the finest education, learns Egyptian wisdom, and lives in privilege. But he knows his Hebrew origins, and one day, seeing an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave, he kills the overseer and flees to the Sinai wilderness. For 40 years, Moses lives as a shepherd in Midian, married to Zipporah, daughter of a Midianite priest. He's become an old man, tending flocks on the slopes of Mount Horeb, where everything changes. A bush burns without being consumed. From the flames God speaks, revealing the divine name, YHWH, often rendered as Yahweh or the Lord. God commissions Moses to return to Egypt and demand the release of the Israelites. Moses protests. He's not eloquent. He's not a leader. Surely God should choose someone else. But God insists, promising Moses' brother Aaron will be his spokesman. What follows is a dramatic confrontation between divine power and imperial authority. Moses and Aaron appear before Pharaoh, demanding he let the Israelites go. Pharaoh refuses, and God sends plagues upon Egypt. Water turning to blood, frogs, gnats, flies, livestock disease, boils, hail, locusts, darkness. Each plague demonstrates YHWH's power over Egypt's gods and natural order. The 10th plague is the most terrible, the death of every Egyptian firstborn. The Israelites mark their doorposts with lamb's blood, so the destroying angel will pass over their homes. This Passover becomes the foundational moment of Israelite identity, commemorated annually forever after. Finally, Pharaoh relents. The Israelites leave Egypt in haste, a mass exodus of perhaps several thousand people, though the biblical numbers suggest much larger crowds. They head east toward the Red Sea, but Pharaoh changes his mind and pursues them with chariots. Trapped between the water and the Egyptian army, the Israelites panic. Then Moses stretches out his hand and the waters part. The Israelites cross on dry ground, but when the Egyptians follow, the waters return and drown Pharaoh's army. On the far shore, Miriam leads the women in a victory song, celebrating their deliverance. But freedom brings new challenges. The Israelites are in the wilderness, without food or clear direction. They grumble against Moses, longing for the security of Egypt, even if it meant slavery. God provides manna from heaven and water from rocks. 3 months after leaving Egypt, they arrive at Mount Sinai. There, amid thunder and lightning, smoke and trumpet blasts, Moses ascends the mountain to meet with God. He stays 40 days and nights, receiving the Torah, the law that will structure Israelite society, religion, and identity. The 10 Commandments form the core. Prohibitions against idolatry, murder, adultery, theft, false witness, and coveting, along with commands to honor God and one's parents and to keep the Sabbath day holy. But the law extends far beyond these principles, encompassing civil regulations, criminal justice, religious ritual, dietary restrictions, agricultural practices, and social welfare. While Moses is on the mountain, the people grow restless. They convince Aaron to make a golden calf, and they worship it, breaking the very first commandment before the covenant is even formalized. Moses descends, sees the idolatry, and smashes the stone tablets in fury. After punishing the guilty, he returns to the mountain to receive the law again. The Israelites construct the tabernacle, a portable sanctuary where God's presence will dwell among them. They organize the camp with the tabernacle at the center, each tribe positioned around it. The Levites are set apart for religious service. Sacrifices and festivals are instituted. The former slaves are becoming a people with law, ritual, and structure. But they're not yet ready for the promised land. Chapter 3: Wilderness Wanderings and the Conquest of Canaan. The journey from Egypt to Canaan should take weeks. Instead, it stretches into 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. This extended sojourn is presented as punishment. When Israelite spies scout out Canaan and report that the inhabitants are powerful and the cities fortified, the people refuse to enter the land. Only Joshua and Caleb urge the people to trust God and proceed. Because of this failure of faith, God declares that the entire generation that left Egypt, except Joshua and Caleb, must die in the wilderness. Their children will be the ones to inherit the promise. These wilderness years are marked by repeated rebellions and divine responses. The earth swallows Korah and his followers when they challenge Moses' authority. Poisonous serpents bite the people until Moses erects a bronze serpent on a pole. Those who look upon it are healed. Water springs from rocks, manna continues to fall each morning, and God's presence remains visible as a pillar of cloud by day and fire by night. The Israelites encounter other peoples during their wanderings. The Edomites and Moabites refuse passage through their territories, forcing long detours. The Amorite king Sihon attacks, and Israel defeats him, capturing his land east of the Jordan River. King Og of Bashan also falls to Israelite forces. These victories give the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh territory to settle even before crossing into Canaan proper. As the 40 years near their end, the Israelites camp on the plains of Moab, across the Jordan from Jericho. Moses, now 120 years old, knows he will not enter the promised land himself. He delivers a series of farewell addresses, recounting Israel's history, reviewing the law, warning against idolatry, and urging faithfulness to the covenant. These speeches, recorded in Deuteronomy, emphasize that the land is a gift, not something earned. The Israelites will prosper if they remain faithful to YHWH, but if they turn to other gods, they will face exile and destruction. Moses climbs Mount Nebo, gazes across the Jordan to the land he's led Israel toward for 4 decades, and dies. He's buried in an unmarked grave, and the people mourn for 30 days. Joshua, who has served as Moses' assistant throughout the wilderness period, now takes command. God commissions him with the same promise given to Abraham: "I will be with you." The conquest of Canaan begins with Jericho, the fortified city guarding the entrance to the Central Highlands. Israelite spies enter the city and find refuge with Rahab, a prostitute who hides them in exchange for protection when the attack comes. The Israelites camp outside Jericho's walls. For 6 days, they march around the city once daily in complete silence except for the sound of ram's horn trumpets. On the 7th day, they circle 7 times, and at Joshua's command, the people shout. The walls collapse and Jericho falls. Only Rahab and her family are spared, and she's incorporated into Israel. The next target is Ai, a smaller city. But an Israelite named Achan has taken forbidden plunder from Jericho, violating the ban on keeping spoils. Because of this sin, the assault on Ai fails disastrously. Only after Achan is identified and executed does Joshua succeed in capturing Ai through a clever ambush. Word of Israel's victories spreads through Canaan, creating both fear and resistance. The people of Gibeon cleverly tricked Joshua into making a peace treaty by pretending to be from a distant land. When the deception is discovered, it's too late to break the treaty, so the Gibeonites become servants of Israel. But other Canaanite kings form coalitions to resist. The southern coalition, led by the king of Jerusalem, attacks Gibeon for making peace with Israel. Joshua marches all night to relieve his new allies, and in the ensuing battle, the sun stands still, extending daylight so Israel can complete the victory. Joshua's campaign systematically breaks the power of Canaan's city-states. He conquers the south, taking Hebron, Debir, and other strongholds. Then he turns north, defeating a coalition led by the king of Hazor near the waters of Merom. The biblical account presents a swift, total conquest, though archaeological evidence and hints within the text itself suggest the reality was more complex and gradual. Not all cities are captured. Some groups, like the Philistines on the coast and various Canaanite enclaves, remain independent. The hill country is more thoroughly subdued than the valleys with their chariot-equipped armies. Joshua divides the land among the 12 tribes by lot. Each tribe receives a territorial allotment, though the Levites receive only cities scattered among the other tribes, as their inheritance is religious service rather than land. Joshua establishes Shechem as a covenant renewal site where the people pledge to serve YHWH alone. Before he dies, Joshua delivers his own farewell address, echoing Moses' warnings. Faithfulness brings blessing, apostasy brings disaster. With Joshua's death, the conquest generation passes, and Israel enters a new, uncertain phase of its history. Chapter 4. The Period of the Judges. The book of Judges opens with a statement that reverberates through the entire period. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. After Joshua's death, Israel has no central government, no standing army, no permanent capital. The 12 tribes are loosely confederated, united by shared ancestry, covenant obligations, and the central sanctuary, which eventually settles at Shiloh. This decentralized structure makes Israel vulnerable to external threats and internal chaos. The pattern of the Judges period repeats in cycles. Israel serves YHWH for a time. Then the people turn to worship Canaanite gods like Baal and Asherah. This apostasy brings divine judgment in the form of foreign oppression. Israel cries out for deliverance, and God raises up a judge, a charismatic military leader who defeats the oppressor and brings peace. But after the judge dies, the cycle begins again, each iteration seemingly worse than the last. The first major judge is Othniel, who defeats the king of Am-Naharaim and brings 40 years of peace. Then the Moabite king Eglon oppresses Israel until Ehud, a left-handed Benjaminite, assassinates him with a hidden dagger and leads Israel to victory. Shamgar kills 600 Philistines with an ox goad. But the most detailed accounts focus on later judges whose stories are more complex. Deborah, the only female judge, is both a prophet and Israel's leader. When the Canaanite king Jabin, whose commander is Sisera, oppresses the northern tribes with his 900 iron chariots, Deborah summons Barak to lead an army against him. Barak refuses to go unless Deborah accompanies him. She agrees, but prophesies that the honor of killing Sisera will go to a woman. In the ensuing battle, a flash flood mires Sisera's chariots in mud, and his army is routed. Sisera flees on foot, and takes refuge in the tent of Jael, wife of Heber the Kenite. She welcomes him, gives him milk, and when he falls asleep, she drives a tent peg through his skull. Deborah's victory song celebrates this triumph in some of the oldest poetry in the Hebrew Bible. Gideon's story follows. Midianite raiders sweep through Israel each harvest season, destroying crops and livestock. When the angel of the Lord appears to Gideon, he's threshing wheat in a winepress, hiding from the raiders. God calls him to deliver Israel, but Gideon doubts. He tests God with fleeces, asking for signs. Finally convinced, Gideon tears down his father's altar to Baal and gathers an army. But God reduces his force from 32,000 to just 300 men, ensuring that the victory will clearly be divine rather than human. Using trumpets, torches, and clay jars, Gideon's tiny force creates panic in the vast Midianite camp at night. The confused enemies attack each other, and the Midianites flee. Israel enjoys 40 years of peace under Gideon, who refuses the people's request to become king, insisting that YHWH alone should rule over Israel. But after Gideon's death, his son Abimelech murders his 70 brothers and declares himself king. His brutal 3-year reign ends when a woman drops a millstone on his head during a siege. Jephthah, a mighty warrior born to a prostitute, is driven out by his legitimate half-brothers. He becomes a bandit leader, but when the Ammonites threaten Israel, the elders beg Jephthah to command their forces. He agrees, negotiates with the Ammonites, and when diplomacy fails, leads Israel to military victory. But Jephthah makes a rash vow. He will sacrifice whatever comes out of his house first to greet him upon his return. Tragically, his only daughter emerges dancing to celebrate his victory. Bound by his oath, Jephthah sacrifices her, a horrifying moment that shows how far Israel has fallen from the law's standards. The final major judge is Samson, whose story reads like tragic adventure. Consecrated as a Nazirite from birth, Samson possesses supernatural strength as long as he maintains his vows. No wine, no contact with corpses, and never cutting his hair. His life is a series of conflicts with the Philistines, driven as much by personal vendettas as national deliverance. He kills a lion with his bare hands, slaughters 30 Philistines to pay a bet, burns Philistine crops by tying torches to foxes' tails, and kills 1,000 Philistines with a donkey's jawbone. But Samson's weakness is women. His Philistine wife betrays him. Then he falls in love with Delilah, who persistently seeks the secret of his strength. After 3 failed attempts, Samson finally tells her the truth. His hair has never been cut. While he sleeps, Delilah has his head shaved. His strength gone, the Philistines capture him, gouge out his eyes, and put him to forced labor grinding grain. But during his captivity, his hair grows back. During a Philistine festival honoring their god Dagon, they bring blind Samson to the temple to mock him. Positioned between the temple's main pillars, Samson prays for strength one final time. He pushes against the pillars with all his might, and the temple collapses, killing himself and thousands of Philistines. The book of Judges concludes with 2 horrific stories illustrating Israel's moral disintegration: the tale of Micah's idols and the wandering Levite, and the gang rape, murder, and dismemberment of the Levite's concubine, which leads to civil war between Benjamin and the other tribes. These dark narratives underscore the need for centralized leadership. Israel is descending into chaos. Chapter 5: Samuel, Saul, and the birth of the monarchy. Against the backdrop of increasing disorder, the story of Samuel begins with a barren woman's prayer. Hannah, tormented by her inability to conceive, goes to the sanctuary at Shiloh and prays so intensely that Eli the priest thinks she's drunk. She vows that if God gives her a son, she'll dedicate him to divine service. God grants her request, and Samuel is born. True to her promise, Hannah brings young Samuel to Shiloh to serve under Eli. One night Samuel hears a voice calling his name. 3 times he runs to Eli, thinking the priest has summoned him. Finally, Eli realizes God is speaking to the boy. God reveals that Eli's sons, who are corrupt priests abusing their position, will be punished, and Eli's house will fall. Samuel grows into his role as prophet and judge, eventually leading Israel from his home in Ramah and making regular circuits to various cities. His reputation spreads throughout the land. Israel remains under Philistine pressure during this period. The Philistines are sea peoples who settled along Canaan's southern coast around 1200 BCE, bringing with them iron-working technology and military organization. They dominate Israel politically and economically. When the Israelites carry the Ark of the Covenant into battle, hoping for divine intervention, the Philistines capture it, kill Eli's sons, and decisively defeat Israel. Eli, hearing the news, falls backward from his seat, breaks his neck, and dies. The ark brings plagues upon the Philistines, who send it back to Israel on a cart pulled by cows. As Samuel ages, he appoints his sons as judges, but they are corrupt, accepting bribes and perverting justice. The elders of Israel come to Samuel with a demand: "Give us a king to judge us like all the nations." Samuel is displeased, seeing this as a rejection of Yahweh's kingship over Israel. God tells Samuel that the people have not rejected Samuel but God himself. Samuel warns the people what a king will do: conscript their sons for his army and their daughters for his court, take the best of their fields and flocks, and make them his servants. But the people insist. They want a king who can lead them in battle and provide stability. God tells Samuel to grant their request. Enter Saul, son of Kish, from the tribe of Benjamin. He's handsome and impressively tall, head and shoulders above everyone else. While searching for his father's lost donkeys, Saul consults Samuel the seer. God has already revealed to Samuel that Saul is the chosen king. Samuel secretly anoints Saul, and the Spirit of God comes upon him. Later, Samuel calls a national assembly where lots are cast to publicly identify the king. The lot falls to Saul, but he's hiding among the baggage, overcome with humility or doubt. Brought before the people, his impressive stature seems to confirm his selection. Samuel presents Saul as Israel's first king. Saul quickly proves his worth. When the Ammonite king Nahash besieges Jabesh-Gilead and demands to gouge out the right eye of every inhabitant, Saul rallies Israel's forces, marches through the night, and routs the Ammonites. The grateful citizens of Jabesh-Gilead become Saul's loyal supporters. The kingship is confirmed at Gilgal with great celebration. For a time, Saul succeeds. He establishes a small standing army commanded by his son Jonathan, fights against Israel's enemies on every side, and maintains his headquarters at Gibeah. But cracks soon appear in Saul's reign. Before a battle with the Philistines, Saul waits for Samuel to arrive and offer sacrifices. When Samuel is delayed and Saul's army begins deserting, Saul performs the sacrifice himself, overstepping his authority. Samuel arrives immediately after and pronounces that Saul's kingdom will not continue. God will find a man after his own heart to replace him. Saul's next failure is even more serious. God commands him to destroy the Amalekites utterly, sparing nothing, as judgment for Amalek's attack on Israel during the Exodus. Saul defeats Amalek but spares King Agag and the best of the livestock. When Samuel confronts him, Saul makes excuses. The people wanted to keep the animals for sacrifice. Samuel's response is devastating. To obey is better than sacrifice, and to listen than the fat of rams. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you from being king. Samuel executes Agag himself and never sees Saul again, though he mourns for him. God sends Samuel to Bethlehem, to the house of Jesse. There Samuel is to anoint a new king from among Jesse's sons. Jesse presents his eldest Eliab, who's tall and handsome. But God tells Samuel, "Do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." 7 of Jesse's sons pass before Samuel, but none is chosen. Samuel asks if Jesse has any other sons. Yes, the youngest, David, is out keeping the sheep. They send for him. David arrives, ruddy and handsome, with beautiful eyes. God tells Samuel, "Arise, anoint him, for this is he." Samuel anoints David, and from that day, the Spirit of the Lord rushes upon David. Meanwhile, the Spirit departs from Saul, and he is tormented by an evil spirit. Saul's servants suggest music to soothe him, and they bring David, who is skilled with the lyre. David enters Saul's service, and when he plays, the evil spirit leaves Saul. The two kings of Israel, one anointed but falling, one anointed but rising, now share the same court. The collision between them is inevitable. Chapter 6. David's rise and Saul's fall. War with the Philistines erupts again. The armies face each other across the valley of Elah. Each day, a Philistine champion named Goliath emerges to taunt Israel, challenging anyone to single combat to decide the battle. Goliath stands over 9 feet tall, wears bronze armor weighing 125 pounds, and carries an iron-tipped spear like a weaver's beam. For 40 days, no Israelite dares face him. David's older brothers are in Saul's army, and Jesse sends David to bring them supplies and check on their welfare. David arrives as Goliath issues his daily challenge. David hears the giant's taunts and asks why no one has silenced this uncircumcised Philistine who defies the armies of the living God. David's oldest brother accuses him of arrogance and neglecting the sheep, but David persists. Word reaches Saul, who summons the young man. David volunteers to fight Goliath, recounting how he has killed lions and bears while protecting his flock. Saul offers David his own armor, but it doesn't fit. David removes it and goes to face Goliath with only his staff, his sling, and 5 smooth stones from a stream. Goliath sees David approaching and curses him by his gods, insulted that Israel sends a boy with sticks. David responds that he comes in the name of the Lord of hosts, whom Goliath has defied. As the giant moves toward him, David runs forward, fitting a stone into his sling. The stone flies true, striking Goliath in the forehead. The giant crashes to the ground. David runs forward, takes Goliath's own sword, and cuts off his head. The Philistines flee in panic, and Israel pursues them to the gates of their cities. David becomes a national hero overnight. Saul makes him a commander in the army. David succeeds in every mission Saul assigns him. Women sing as the victorious armies return. Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his 10,000s. The comparison enrages Saul. From that moment, Saul eyes David with suspicion and jealousy. The evil spirit torments Saul with increasing frequency. Twice, while David plays music to soothe him, Saul hurls his spear at David, trying to pin him to the wall. David eludes him both times. Saul begins scheming to destroy David indirectly. He offers David his daughter Merab as wife if David will fight valiantly against the Philistines, hoping David will die in battle. But when the time comes, Saul gives Merab to another man. Then Saul learns that his younger daughter Michal loves David. He offers her to David, with a bride price of 100 Philistine foreskins, again hoping David will die in the attempt. Instead, David returns with 200 foreskins. Saul gives him Michal, but his fear of David deepens. Meanwhile, David and Saul's son Jonathan form a profound friendship. Jonathan loves David as his own soul, and they make a covenant together. Jonathan gives David his robe, armor, sword, bow, and belt, symbols acknowledging that David, not Jonathan, will be the next king. When Saul openly commands his servants to kill David, Jonathan warns his friend and intercedes with his father. For a time, Saul relents, but his hatred resurfaces. After David wins another victory against the Philistines, Saul again tries to spear him. David flees home, and Michal helps him escape through a window, putting a household idol in the bed to fool the pursuers. David becomes a fugitive. He goes first to Samuel at Ramah, then to the priest Ahimelech at Nob, who innocently gives him consecrated bread and Goliath's sword. David realizes he can't stay in Israel and flees to Gath, a Philistine city. There, he pretends to be insane, scribbling on doors and drooling in his beard, so the Philistines will dismiss him as harmless. David escapes and hides in the cave of Adullam. His family joins him, along with others who are distressed, in debt, or discontented. David's band of outlaws numbers 400 men. They become a private army, protecting Israelite settlements from raiders while evading Saul's pursuit. Saul learns that Ahimelech helped David and summons the priests of Nob. Ahimelech defends his actions. David was the king's son-in-law, a loyal servant. How could he know he was a fugitive? Saul doesn't care. He orders his guards to kill all 85 priests. When they refuse, Saul commands Dog the Edomite to do it. Dog murders the priests and then massacres every living thing in Nob: men, women, children, infants, and livestock. Only Abiathar, one of Ahimelech's sons, escapes to join David, bringing the priestly ephod. David's life becomes a desperate game of cat and mouse. He receives intelligence that the Philistines are raiding Keilah and successfully defends the city, but learns that Keilah's citizens will betray him to Saul. He flees to the wilderness of Ziph, where Jonathan visits him one last time to strengthen his hand in God. The Ziphites inform Saul of David's location, but David moves to the wilderness of Maon. Saul pursues so closely that he and David are on opposite sides of the same mountain, but messengers arrive announcing a Philistine raid, forcing Saul to break off the chase. Later, David hides in a cave at En-Gedi. Saul enters that very cave to relieve himself, unaware that David and his men are concealed in the back. David's men urge him to kill Saul, but David refuses to harm the Lord's anointed. Instead, he secretly cuts off a corner of Saul's robe. After Saul leaves, David emerges and calls out, showing the robe piece as proof that he could have killed Saul but chose mercy. Saul weeps, acknowledging that David is more righteous than he is and that David will certainly be king. For the moment, the tension eases, but Saul's repentance is temporary. Soon David is fleeing again. He returns to Philistine territory, this time to Achish king of Gath, who grants him the town of Ziklag. For 16 months, David lives in Philistine territory, supposedly raiding Israelite and friendly settlements, but actually attacking tribes hostile to both Israel and the Philistines, leaving no survivors to report the truth. Meanwhile, in Israel, Samuel dies and all Israel mourns. The Philistines gather their forces for another major assault. Saul, terrified and unable to get guidance from God, disguises himself and consults a medium at Endor, despite having banned such practices. He asks her to summon Samuel's spirit. To the medium's shock, Samuel actually appears, asking why Saul has disturbed him. Samuel's message is devastating. Tomorrow Saul and his sons will die, and Israel will be defeated. The next day, the Philistines attack at Mount Gilboa. The battle goes badly for Israel. Jonathan and his brothers are killed. Saul is badly wounded by archers. Rather than be captured and abused, he falls on his own sword. The Philistines find his body, behead it, strip his armor, and fasten his body to the wall of Bethshan. But the men of Jabesh Gilead, remembering how Saul rescued them years before, travel all night, retrieve the bodies of Saul and his sons, and give them honorable burial. David, who was spared from fighting against Israel when the Philistine commanders insisted he be sent back to Ziklag, learns of Saul's death from an Amalekite who claims to have killed Saul at the king's own request. Expecting a reward, the Amalekite brings Saul's crown and bracelet to David. Instead, David orders the man executed for daring to kill the Lord's anointed. David composes a lament for Saul and Jonathan, one of the most beautiful poems in the Bible. How the mighty have fallen, Saul and Jonathan, beloved and lovely. In life and in death, they were not divided. They were swifter than eagles. They were stronger than lions. The lament reveals David's genuine grief and his magnanimous spirit toward the man who hunted him for years. Israel's first king is dead. The way is now clear for David to claim the throne, but the path will not be smooth. Chapter 7. David's kingdom and glory after Saul's death. David inquires of God whether he should return to Judah. Receiving divine approval, he goes to Hebron, where the men of Judah anoint him king over the tribe of Judah. But the northern tribes follow a different path. Abner, Saul's cousin and army commander, installs Saul's son Ishbosheth as king over Israel from his base in Mahanaim, east of the Jordan. For 2 years, Israel and Judah exist as rival kingdoms. Abner and Joab, David's general, meet at Gibeon, where their armies face each other across a pool. They agree to have 12 men from each side engage in combat. All 24 kill each other simultaneously in a fierce battle. The encounter escalates into full combat, with Abner's forces defeated. During the retreat, Asahel, Joab's younger brother, pursues Abner. Asahel is fast as a wild gazelle, but inexperienced. Abner wants him to stop, but Asahel persists. Finally, Abner strikes backward with the butt of his spear, driving it through Asahel's body. Joab and his brother Abishai continue the pursuit until Abner rallies his troops on a hill and negotiates a ceasefire. The civil war drags on, but David's house grows stronger while Saul's grows weaker. Abner becomes the real power behind Ishbosheth's throne. When Ishbosheth accuses Abner of sleeping with one of Saul's concubines, a serious charge implying a claim to the throne, Abner is furious. He secretly contacts David and offers to bring all Israel over to him. David agrees, but demands that Saul's daughter Michal, David's first wife, whom Saul gave to another man, be returned to him. This strengthens David's claim as Saul's legitimate successor. Abner meets with the elders of Israel and the tribe of Benjamin, Saul's tribe, convincing them to accept David. He then travels to Hebron with 20 men to formalize the agreement. David holds a feast for Abner, and they part as allies. But Joab, who's away during Abner's visit, returns and learns what has happened. Furious that David is negotiating with Asahel's killer, and perhaps fearing Abner will replace him as commander, Joab sends messengers to bring Abner back. When Abner returns, Joab takes him aside as if to speak privately and stabs him in the stomach, avenging Asahel's death. David is horrified. He publicly mourns Abner, declaring his own innocence and pronouncing a curse on Joab's house. He follows Abner's bier weeping and fasting, making clear to everyone that he had no part in the murder. The people recognize David's sincerity, and his support grows. 2 of Ishbosheth's captains assassinate him, cutting off his head and bringing it to David, expecting a reward. Like the Amalekite who claimed to kill Saul, they badly misjudge David. He executes them for murdering an innocent man in his own house and has their hands and feet cut off. Their bodies hung by the pool at Hebron. Ishbosheth receives honorable burial in Abner's tomb. With no rival remaining, the elders of all Israel come to Hebron. They anoint David king over all 12 tribes. He's 30 years old and will reign 40 years. David's first major act is capturing Jerusalem. The city, still held by the Jebusites, sits on a hill between the northern and southern tribes, belonging to neither. The Jebusites are confident their fortress is impregnable. They taunt David that even the blind and lame could defend it. But Joab leads a strike force through the water shaft, capturing the city from within. David makes Jerusalem his capital, calling it the City of David. It's a brilliant political move. A new capital with no tribal associations, belonging equally to all Israel. David builds a palace there with help from Hiram, king of Tyre, who provides cedar logs and skilled craftsmen. The Philistines, alarmed by David's growing power, launch 2 invasions. David defeats them both, the second time, pursuing them so decisively that Philistine power is broken. They never again threaten Israel during David's reign. David then focuses on bringing the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem, seeking to make his new capital not just the political, but also the religious center of the nation. The first attempt ends in disaster when a man named Uzzah reaches out to steady the Ark and is struck dead for touching it. David, frightened, leaves the Ark at a nearby house for 3 months. When he learns that the household is being blessed, David tries again, this time following proper procedures. As the Ark enters Jerusalem, David dances before it with all his might, wearing only a linen ephod. His wife Michal, watching from a window, despises him for his uninhibited celebration. That night, she accuses him of exposing himself shamelessly before servant girls. David responds that he was celebrating before the Lord, who chose him instead of her father Saul. The text notes that Michal remains childless the rest of her life. With the Ark in Jerusalem and the kingdom secure, David tells the prophet Nathan that he wants to build a house for God, a proper temple to replace the portable tabernacle. Nathan initially approves, but that night receives a message from God. God has never asked for a house. Instead, God will build a house for David, not a building, but a dynasty. God promises that David's son will build the temple, that David's throne will be established forever, and that David's descendants will reign in perpetuity. This Davidic covenant becomes foundational to Israelite royal theology and later messianic hope. David extends his kingdom through military campaigns. He defeats the Moabites, subjecting them to harsh treatment. He destroys the Iranian kingdoms to the north, placing garrisons in Damascus. He defeats the Ammonites and the Edomites. From the Euphrates River to the border of Egypt, from the Mediterranean to the desert, David establishes an empire. Surrounding nations send tribute. Israel reaches its greatest extent and power. At the height of his success, David commits his greatest sin. One evening, walking on his palace roof, he sees a woman bathing. She is extraordinarily beautiful. David inquires about her and learns she is Bathsheba, wife of Uriah the Hittite, one of David's elite warriors who is away at war. Despite knowing she's married, David sends for her and sleeps with her. Bathsheba becomes pregnant. David tries to cover up the affair by bringing Uriah back from the battlefield, hoping he'll sleep with his wife and think the child is his. But Uriah, a man of integrity, refuses to enjoy his wife's company while his fellow soldiers sleep in the field. Frustrated, David sends Uriah back to the front with sealed orders for Joab. Place Uriah in the heaviest fighting and then withdraw, leaving him to die. Joab obeys. Uriah is killed. After Bathsheba mourns, David marries her. Everything seems resolved. But God sends Nathan the prophet to David with a parable about a rich man with many flocks who steals a poor man's only lamb to feed a guest. David is furious at the injustice, declaring the rich man deserves death. Nathan looks at David and says, "You are the man." The prophet pronounces judgment. The child will die, and David's household will be plagued with violence and sexual sin. David immediately confesses, "I have sinned against the Lord." Nathan assures him that God has taken away his sin and he won't die. But the consequences remain. The child becomes ill. David fasts and prays for 7 days, lying on the ground, refusing to eat. On the 7th day, the child dies. David's servants fear telling him, but David perceives the truth from their whispers. He rises, washes, worships, and eats. His servants are confused. He mourned while the child lived, but now seems at peace. David explains, while the child lived, he hoped God might be gracious. Now that the child is dead, he can't bring him back. David comforts Bathsheba, and in time she bears another son, Solomon, who will inherit David's throne. David's kingdom is secure, his power unmatched. But Nathan's prophecy begins to unfold, and violence will tear his house apart from within. Chapter 8. David's decline and Absalom's rebellion. The sword never departs from David's house, just as Nathan prophesied. The trouble begins with David's eldest son, Amnon. who becomes obsessed with his beautiful half-sister Tamar. Amnon pretends to be ill and asks for Tamar to come prepare food for him. When she brings food to his bedroom, Amnon grabs her and demands she sleep with him. Tamar resists, pleading with him not to commit this disgrace, offering to marry him if he asks David's permission. But Amnon forces himself on her. Immediately afterward, his love turns to hatred even greater than his previous lust, and he throws her out. Tamar, a virgin princess, is devastated and disgraced. She tears her ornate robe, puts ashes on her head, and goes to live in desolation in the house of her brother, Absalom. Absalom hates Amnon for what he's done, but says nothing, waiting 2 years for his revenge. Then Absalom invites all the king's sons to a sheep-shearing festival. During the feast, Absalom's servants kill Amnon on Absalom's command. The other princes flee in panic. Initial reports reaching David claim all his sons are dead. Eventually, the truth emerges. Only Amnon is dead, and Absalom has fled to his maternal grandfather, the king of Geshur, where he remains in exile for 3 years. David mourns for Amnon but longs for Absalom. Finally, through Joab's intervention and a clever woman's parable, David allows Absalom to return to Jerusalem but refuses to see him. For 2 more years, Absalom lives in Jerusalem without his father's audience. Frustrated, Absalom sets Joab's field on fire to get his attention, and through Joab gains reconciliation with David. But the damage is done. Absalom begins scheming to take the throne. He acquires a chariot and horses with 50 men to run before him, making himself conspicuous. He rises early and stands by the city gate, intercepting anyone coming to the king for judgment. Absalom tells them their case is good and right, but there's no one to hear them. If only he were judge in the land, he would give everyone justice. When people bow to him, he embraces and kisses them. In this way, Absalom steals the hearts of Israel. After 4 years of this campaign, Absalom asks permission to go to Hebron to fulfill a vow. David grants it, not suspecting his son's intentions. In Hebron, where David was first anointed king, Absalom has himself proclaimed king. He sends secret messengers throughout Israel, building a coalition. Among those who join Absalom is Ahithophel, David's counselor and Bathsheba's grandfather, who may still resent David for what happened to Bathsheba and Uriah. Ahithophel's support is crucial. His counsel is regarded as if one consulted God himself. Word reaches David that the hearts of Israel are with Absalom. Suddenly, in his own capital, David is in mortal danger. He makes the painful decision to flee Jerusalem with his household and his loyal followers. As they leave, people weep. David goes barefoot up the Mount of Olives, his head covered in mourning. The ark is brought out to accompany David, but he sends it back. If God favors him, he'll return. If not, God should do what seems good. David sends the priests back to act as spies in Jerusalem. Absalom enters Jerusalem unopposed and takes up residence in the palace. On Ahithophel's advice, he publicly sleeps with David's concubines on the palace roof, fulfilling Nathan's prophecy and making reconciliation with David impossible. Ahithophel then advises an immediate pursuit with 12,000 men, while David is weary and disheartened. He'll strike down only David, and the people will return peacefully. But Hushai, David's friend whom David sent back as a spy, offers contrary advice. David is a mighty warrior who won't be with the people, but hiding somewhere. An initial setback could cause panic. Instead, gather all Israel and lead them personally in overwhelming force. Absalom chooses Hushai's counsel, buying David precious time. When Ahithophel sees his advice rejected, he goes home, sets his affairs in order, and hangs himself. David crosses the Jordan and gathers his forces at Mahanaim. Loyal troops rally to him, including his veteran commanders. David organizes 3 divisions under Joab, Abishai, and Ittai the Gittite. Despite his desire to lead them personally, his men insist he's worth 10,000 of them and must stay behind. As the army marches out, David gives orders to all three commanders. Deal gently for my sake with the young man Absalom. Everyone hears the command. The battle takes place in the forest of Ephraim. David's experienced troops win decisively. 20,000 of Absalom's forces die, many killed by the treacherous forest terrain. Absalom, riding a mule, passes under a great oak tree. His head catches in the thick branches, and the mule goes on, leaving Absalom hanging between heaven and earth. A soldier reports this to Joab, who asks why he didn't kill Absalom. The man replies that he heard the king's command. Joab has no such scruples. He takes 3 javelins and drives them into Absalom's heart while he is still alive in the oak. Joab's armor-bearers finish the job. Joab sounds the trumpet to halt the pursuit. They throw Absalom's body into a pit in the forest and cover it with stones. Runners bring news to David. The first announces victory but evades questions about Absalom. The second, Cushi, delivers the message more directly. Absalom is dead. David is devastated. He goes to the room above the gate and weeps, crying out repeatedly, "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom. Would I had died instead of you, O Absalom, my son, my son." The victorious army returns to find the king in deep mourning, and their triumph turns to shame, as if they've done something wrong. Joab confronts David harshly. The king's grief dishonors those who saved his life. David loves those who hate him and hates those who love him. If Absalom had lived and they had all died, the king would be pleased. Joab demands David go out and speak to his troops, or they'll all desert him. David pulls himself together and takes his seat in the gate. The rebellion is over, but at tremendous personal cost. David returns to Jerusalem, but his kingdom is fractured. The northern tribes feel slighted by Judah's prominent role in bringing David back. A troublemaker named Sheba leads a brief rebellion, proclaiming, "We have no portion in David." The revolt is quickly crushed when a wise woman negotiates with Joab, and the citizens of Abel, Bethmaach's son, throw Sheba's head over the wall to Joab. David's final years are marked by continued violence and turbulence. His later reign sees famine, more battles with Philistines where his men must rescue him, and a census that brings plague upon Israel. David is a great king, a man after God's own heart, but also deeply flawed, and his family pays the price for his failures. As David grows old and can't stay warm even under blankets, the question of succession looms. Which of his sons will inherit the throne? Chapter 9. Solomon's Reign and the First Temple. As David lies on his deathbed, unable even to keep warm, his oldest surviving son, Adonijah, makes a bid for the throne. He gathers supporters, including Joab the general and Abiathar the priest, holds a coronation feast, and declares himself king. But he doesn't invite Nathan the prophet, Zadok the priest, or Benaiah the warrior, David's most loyal supporters. He also doesn't invite his younger brother Solomon. Nathan quickly alerts Bathsheba, Solomon's mother. Together they go to David and remind him of his promise that Solomon would succeed him. They warn that if Adonijah becomes king, Solomon and Bathsheba will be considered traitors and executed. David immediately acts. He orders Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, and Benaiah to take Solomon to Gihon, mount him on David's own mule, anoint him king, blow the trumpet, and proclaim, "Long live King Solomon." They obey, and the celebration is so loud that the earth seems to split with the noise. At his feast, Adonijah hears the trumpet and commotion. Jonathan, the son of Abiathar, arrives with news. David has made Solomon king. Adonijah's guests panic and scatter. Adonijah himself flees to the altar, grasping its horns and pleading for mercy. Solomon promises to spare him if he proves worthy. David gives Solomon his final charge: be strong, keep God's laws, and prosper. Regarding enemies, Joab must be punished for his murders of Abner and Amasa. Shimei, who cursed David during Absalom's rebellion, must not be allowed to go unpunished. David's last words are hard. Bring his gray head down with blood to Sheol. Then David dies after reigning 40 years. He's buried in the city of David, and Solomon establishes his throne. Solomon acts swiftly to secure his position. When Adonijah asks permission to marry Abishag, the young woman who cared for David, Solomon sees it as a veiled claim to the throne and has him executed. He banishes Abiathar from the priesthood, fulfilling a prophecy against Eli's house. He orders Benaiah to kill Joab, who flees to the altar but is executed there. Solomon confines Shimei to Jerusalem. When Shimei leaves the city to retrieve runaway slaves, Solomon has him killed for breaking the confinement. With all potential rivals eliminated, Solomon's kingdom is firmly established. The young king goes to Gibeon to sacrifice at the great high place. That night, God appears to Solomon in a dream and offers to give him anything he asks. Solomon requests wisdom to govern the people justly, acknowledging that he's young and doesn't know how to carry out his duties. God is pleased that Solomon didn't ask for long life, wealth, or the death of his enemies. Because Solomon asked for wisdom, God grants him the wisest and most discerning heart that has ever existed or ever will. As a bonus, God also gives him wealth and honor beyond any other king, and promises long life if Solomon walks in obedience. Solomon's wisdom becomes legendary. When two prostitutes come to him, each claiming a living baby is hers and a dead baby belongs to the other, Solomon calls for a sword and orders the living child cut in two, half for each woman. One woman agrees. The other immediately cries out to give the baby to her rival rather than kill it. Solomon awards the child to the second woman, recognizing her as the true mother. News of this judgment spreads throughout Israel, and the people hold Solomon in awe. Solomon organizes his kingdom with remarkable administrative sophistication. He appoints 12 district governors to provide food for the royal household, each responsible for 1 month per year. He amasses wealth through trade, controlling the routes between Egypt and Mesopotamia. He imports horses and chariots, establishing chariot cities throughout his realm. His kingdom enjoys unprecedented peace and prosperity. The text says that Judah and Israel were as numerous as sand by the sea, eating and drinking and rejoicing. Solomon's domain extends from the Euphrates to the border of Egypt, and all these kingdoms bring tribute. But Solomon's greatest achievement is building the temple. David had accumulated vast amounts of gold, silver, bronze, iron, and cedar for the project. Solomon makes a treaty with Hiram, king of Tyre, who provides cedar and cypress logs from Lebanon and skilled craftsmen, particularly a master bronze worker, also named Hiram. Solomon conscripts laborers from throughout Israel, sending them in shifts to Lebanon. 30,000 Israelites work 1 month in Lebanon and 2 months at home. Additionally, 70,000 burden bearers and 80,000 stonecutters work in the quarries. The temple construction begins in the 4th year of Solomon's reign, 480 years after the Exodus from Egypt. The building is 60 cubits long, 20 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high, not enormous by ancient standards, but exquisitely crafted. The stone is dressed at the quarry, so no hammer or chisel is heard at the temple site. The interior is lined with cedar, carved with gourds and flowers. No stone is visible. The inner sanctuary, the Holy of Holies, is overlaid with pure gold. It houses the Ark of the Covenant beneath 2 massive cherubim with 15-foot wingspans, also overlaid with gold. The main hall is decorated with gold, precious stones, and elaborate carvings. 2 bronze pillars, each 27 feet tall, stand at the entrance, named Jachin and Boaz. A massive bronze basin called the Sea, 15 feet in diameter and supported by 12 bronze oxen, holds water for priestly washings. 10 bronze stands with wheeled basins, elaborate lampstands, tables, and utensils complete the furnishings. The construction takes 7 years. When finished, Solomon assembles all Israel for the dedication. The priests bring the ark into the Holy of Holies. As they withdraw, a cloud fills the temple, the glory of the Lord. So thick, the priests can't perform their service. Solomon blesses the assembly and prays a magnificent prayer, acknowledging that heaven itself cannot contain God, much less this house he has built. He asks that God would hear prayers directed toward this place, whether from Israelites or foreigners, whether prayers of confession, petition, or thanksgiving. Solomon offers thousands of animals in sacrifice. The dedication feast lasts 14 days. Fire descends from heaven to consume the sacrifices, and the glory of the Lord fills the temple. When the people see it, they bow with their faces to the ground and worship, praising God. That night, God appears to Solomon again, accepting the temple and warning Solomon. If he turns away from following God and serves other gods, Israel will be torn from the land and this temple will be rejected. But Solomon is at the height of his power and glory. Kings and queens come from distant lands to witness his wisdom and wealth. The Queen of Sheba travels from Arabia, bringing spices, gold, and precious stones. She tests Solomon with hard questions, and he answers them all. Overwhelmed by his wisdom, the magnificence of his palace and temple, and the organization of his kingdom, she blesses the God of Israel, who delighted in Solomon and set him on the throne. Solomon gives her everything she desires, and she returns to her own land. Solomon's wealth becomes proverbial. He receives 666 talents of gold annually, besides trade income. He makes silver as common in Jerusalem as stones. He has 700 wives and 300 concubines, many from foreign nations. This is where Solomon's story turns tragic. As he grows old, his foreign wives turn his heart toward their gods. Solomon builds high places for Chemosh, god of Moab, and Molech, god of Ammon, on the mountain east of Jerusalem. He does this for all his foreign wives, allowing them to burn incense and sacrifice to their gods. The man God appeared to twice, who built the temple, who possessed unmatched wisdom. Solomon's heart turns away from the Lord. God is angry and tells Solomon that because he has broken the covenant, the kingdom will be torn from his son. But for David's sake, it won't happen in Solomon's lifetime, and one tribe will remain for David's descendant. God raises up adversaries against Solomon. Hadad the Edomite, who escaped David's massacre of Edom as a child, returns to cause trouble. Rezon seizes control of Damascus and becomes Israel's enemy. Most dangerous is Jeroboam, an industrious young Ephraimite whom Solomon puts in charge of forced labor. The prophet Ahijah meets Jeroboam on the road, tears his new garment into 12 pieces, and tells Jeroboam to take 10 pieces. This symbolizes that God will tear the kingdom from Solomon and give 10 tribes to Jeroboam. Solomon tries to kill Jeroboam, who flees to Egypt. Solomon reigns 40 years, amassing legendary wealth and wisdom, but ultimately failing the test of faithfulness. He's buried in the city of David, and his son Rehoboam succeeds him. The United Kingdom stands at the brink of division. Everything David built, everything Solomon expanded, is about to fracture along old tribal fault lines. The golden age of Israel is ending. Chapter 10. The divided kingdom and prophets. Rehoboam travels to Shechem, where all Israel has gathered to make him king. But Jeroboam returns from Egypt, and the northern tribes present demands. Solomon imposed heavy burdens and harsh labor. If Rehoboam will lighten these burdens, they'll serve him. Rehoboam asks for 3 days to consider. He consults Solomon's older advisors, who counsel him to grant the request and speak kindly to the people. But Rehoboam also consults his own generation, young men he grew up with. They advise him to respond harshly. "My little finger is thicker than my father's thighs. My father laid on you a heavy yoke. I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips. I will discipline you with scorpions." When the assembly reconvenes, Rehoboam follows his young advisor's counsel and speaks harshly. The northern tribes respond immediately. "What portion have we in David? To your tents, O Israel. Look now to your own house, David. The kingdom splits. The northern 10 tribes make Jeroboam king over Israel. Only Judah and Benjamin remain loyal to Rehoboam and the house of David. When Rehoboam sends his labor chief to the northern tribes, they stone him to death. Rehoboam barely escapes to Jerusalem. He musters an army to force the northern tribes back into submission. But the prophet Shammah's word, "You shall not go up or fight against your relatives. Every man return to his home, for this thing is from me." Remarkably, they obey, and civil war is averted for the moment. Now there are 2 Hebrew kingdoms. The northern kingdom, usually called Israel or Ephraim, is larger, wealthier, and more populous, controlling most of the territory and 10 of the 12 tribes. The southern kingdom, Judah, is smaller but possesses Jerusalem, the temple, and the Davidic dynasty. This division shapes Hebrew history for the next 2 centuries. Jeroboam faces an immediate problem. His people naturally want to go to Jerusalem for festivals and sacrifices. Fearing this will turn their hearts back to the Davidic king, Jeroboam creates alternative worship centers. He makes 2 golden calves, placing one in Bethel in the south and one in Dan in the north, telling the people, "Behold your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt." He appoints non-Levite priests, institutes new festivals, and fundamentally alters Israelite religion. The biblical writers see this as the original sin that dooms the northern kingdom. A prophet from Judah appears at Bethel while Jeroboam is offering incense, prophesying that a future Davidic king named Josiah will sacrifice the priests of the high places on this altar. When Jeroboam stretches out his hand to seize the prophet, his hand withers. The altar splits, ashes pour out, and Jeroboam begs the prophet to pray for him. The prophet does, and Jeroboam's hand is restored. But Jeroboam doesn't change his ways. Both kingdoms slide into apostasy. Rehoboam allows high places, sacred stones, and Asherah poles throughout Judah. Male shrine prostitutes operate in the land. In Rehoboam's 5th year, Pharaoh Shishak of Egypt invades, taking away the treasures of the temple and palace. The golden shields Solomon made are replaced with bronze replicas. The pattern is set. Both kingdoms will cycle through periods of relative faithfulness and blatant idolatry. Internal coups and assassinations, wars with each other, and invasions from greater powers. The northern kingdom proves particularly unstable. Jeroboam's son Nadab reigns only 2 years before Baasha of Issachar assassinates him and seizes the throne, wiping out Jeroboam's entire family. Baasha reigns 24 years, but continues Jeroboam's sins. His son Elah rules 2 years before Zimri, a chariot commander, kills him. Zimri eliminates Baasha's entire family, but reigns only 7 days. When the army hears what happened, they proclaim their commander Omri as king. Omri besieges Zimri in the palace, and Zimri burns it down around himself. Omri establishes a new capital at Samaria and creates a powerful dynasty. But the biblical writers dismiss him in 6 verses because he did evil in God's eyes. Omri's son Ahab becomes Israel's most notorious king. He marries Jezebel, daughter of the king of Sidon, and goes beyond all previous kings in wickedness. He builds a temple to Baal in Samaria, making worship of the Phoenician storm god official state religion. Jezebel actively persecutes prophets of YHWH, killing many and forcing others into hiding. Into this crisis steps Elijah the Tishbite. He appears before Ahab and announces that there will be neither dew nor rain except at his word. Then Elijah hides by a brook east of the Jordan, where ravens bring him food. When the brook dries up, God sends him to a widow in Zarephath in Sidon, ironically, Jezebel's homeland. The widow is gathering sticks to make one final meal for herself and her son before they die of starvation. Elijah asks her to make him a cake first, promising that her flour and oil won't run out until the drought ends. She obeys in faith, and the promise proves true. Later, the widow's son dies. Elijah carries him to the upper room, stretches himself upon the child 3 times, and cries out to God. The boy's life returns, and Elijah presents him alive to his mother. After 3 years of drought, God sends Elijah back to Ahab. Elijah proposes a contest on Mount Carmel. 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah against Elijah alone. Let each side prepare a bull for sacrifice, but not light the fire. Whichever deity answers with fire is the true God. The prophets of Baal go first, calling on Baal from morning until afternoon. Nothing happens. Elijah mocks them. Shout louder. Perhaps he's deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he's sleeping and must be awakened. They shout louder, cutting themselves with swords and spears until blood flows. Still nothing. Then Elijah repairs the broken altar of the Lord, arranges the wood and sacrifice, and orders that 4 jars of water be poured over it 3 times. Water fills the trench around the altar. Elijah prays simply, "Answer me, Lord, that these people may know that you are God." Fire falls from heaven, consuming the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the soil, and licking up the water in the trench. The people fall on their faces. The Lord, He is God. Elijah orders them to seize the prophets of Baal. He takes them to the Goshen valley and slaughters all of them. Then he tells Ahab to eat and drink because rain is coming. Elijah climbs to the top of Carmel, bows down with his face between his knees, and sends his servant to look toward the sea. 6 times the servant reports seeing nothing. The 7th time, a cloud as small as a man is rising from the sea. Soon the sky grows black with clouds. Wind rises, and heavy rain falls. The drought is broken. But Jezebel is furious that Elijah killed her prophets. She sends a message, "May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like one of them." Elijah, who just called down fire from heaven, flees in fear. He travels south into the wilderness, sits under a broom tree, and asks to die. An angel brings him food. Strengthened, Elijah travels 40 days to Mount Horeb, the mountain of God. There he takes refuge in a cave. God asks what he's doing there. Elijah pours out his complaint. He has been zealous for the Lord, while Israel has forsaken the covenant, torn down the altars, and killed the prophets. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too. God tells Elijah to stand on the mountain. A powerful wind tears the mountains and shatters rocks, but the Lord is not in the wind. An earthquake comes, but the Lord is not in the earthquake. Fire follows, but the Lord is not in the fire. Then comes a gentle whisper. Elijah wraps his cloak around his face and stands at the cave entrance. The voice repeats the question, and Elijah gives the same answer. God responds with new marching orders. Anoint Hazael as king over Aram, Jehu as king over Israel, and Elisha as prophet to succeed Elijah. These 3 will execute God's judgment on Israel. As for Elijah's complaint, God has reserved 7,000 in Israel who haven't bowed to Baal. Elijah finds Elisha plowing with 12 yoke of oxen. Elijah throws his cloak over him, a call to prophetic ministry. Elisha slaughters his oxen, burns his plowing equipment to cook the meat, gives a farewell feast, and follows Elijah. Meanwhile, in Judah, the situation is hardly better. When Ahab's daughter Athaliah marries Judah's king Joram, Baal worship spreads to the southern kingdom. The prophet Joel warns of judgment like a locust plague. The wickedness of both kingdoms is setting the stage for divine judgment that will come in the form of ancient empires rising in the east. Chapter 11. Fall of Israel and Survival of Judah. The northern kingdom of Israel careens through the 9th century BCE with political instability, an increasing threat from the Aramean kingdom of Damascus. King Ahab dies in battle, and his son Joram succeeds him. But Elijah's prophecy of judgment against Ahab's house is about to be fulfilled. The prophet Elisha, who received Elijah's mantle after his master was taken up to heaven in a whirlwind, sends a young prophet to anoint Jehu, an army commander, as king over Israel. The young prophet pours oil on Jehu's head and declares that he will strike down the house of Ahab so that all of Ahab's descendants perish. Jehu is with fellow officers when this happens, and when he tells them, they immediately proclaim him king. Jehu rides furiously to Jezreel, where King Joram is recovering from wounds. Judah's king Ahaziah is visiting. When Joram and Ahaziah ride out to meet Jehu, Joram asks, "Have you come in peace?" Jehu responds, "What peace can there be as long as the idolatry and witchcraft of your mother Jezebel abound?" Joram wheels around to flee, shouting, "Treachery, Ahaziah!" Jehu draws his bow and shoots Joram between the shoulders, piercing his heart. Jehu orders Joram's body thrown onto the plot of ground that once belonged to Naboth, whom Jezebel had murdered so Ahab could seize his vineyard. Ahaziah flees but is wounded and dies. Jehu enters Jezreel. Jezebel hears he's coming and puts on eye makeup, arranges her hair, and looks out a window. As Jehu enters the gate, she calls out, "Have you come in peace, you Zimri, you murderer of your master?" Jehu looks up and calls out, "Who is on my side?" 2 or 3 eunuchs look out. "Throw her down," Jehu commands. They throw Jezebel from the window. Her blood spatters the wall and the horses, and Jehu tramples her underfoot. After he eats and drinks, he orders them to bury her, for she was a king's daughter. But when they go out, they find only her skull, feet, and hands. The dogs have devoured the rest, fulfilling Elijah's prophecy. Jehu proceeds to massacre all 70 of Ahab's sons, all his great men, close friends, and priests. Then he summons all the prophets, servants, and priests of Baal, claiming he will hold a great sacrifice to Baal. When they're all assembled in the temple of Baal, he posts 80 guards outside and orders the slaughter of everyone inside. The temple of Baal is demolished, torn down, and turned into a latrine. Jehu eliminates Baal worship from Israel, but he maintains Jeroboam's golden calves at Bethel and Dan. God commends Jehu for executing judgment on Ahab's house and promises that his descendants to the 4th generation will sit on Israel's throne. But Jehu doesn't walk in God's law with all his heart. During his reign, Hazael king of Aram begins conquering Israelite territory east of the Jordan. In Judah, equally dramatic events unfold. When Athaliah, Ahab's daughter and Ahaziah's mother, learns that her son is dead, she seizes power and murders all the royal family, her own grandchildren. But Ahazah's sister Jehosheba secretly rescues the infant prince Joash and hides him in the temple for 6 years while Athaliah rules. In the 7th year, the priest Jehoiada organizes a coup. On a Sabbath, he reveals the young king to the palace guards and army commanders, who pledge their loyalty. They bring Joash out, crown him, and anoint him king. The people clap and shout, "Long live the king!" Athaliah hears the noise, rushes to the temple, and sees the king standing by the pillar with officers and trumpeters, the people rejoicing. She tears her robes and cries, "Treason! Treason!" But Jehoiada orders her taken out and executed. The people destroy the temple of Baal and kill its priest. Joash becomes king at age 7. Under Jehoiada's guidance, he repairs the temple and follows God. But after Jehoiada dies, Joash turns to idolatry. When Jehoiada's son Zechariah prophesies against this apostasy, Joash has him stoned in the temple courtyard. The Iranians invade, and though their force is small, they defeat Judah's army and wound Joash. His own officials conspire against him and assassinate him. The 8th century begins with relative prosperity for both kingdoms. In Israel, Jeroboam II has a long and successful reign, expanding Israel's borders. In Judah, Uzziah, also called Azariah, reigns 52 years, building up Judah's defenses and agriculture. But prosperity breeds complacency and injustice. Into this situation, God raises up prophets who thunder against Israel's sins. Amos, a shepherd from Tekoa in Judah, prophesies in the northern kingdom. He condemns Israel for selling the righteous for silver and the needy for a pair of sandals, for trampling the poor and denying them justice. Religious festivals mean nothing when society is corrupt. Amos warns that Israel will go into exile. When Amaziah the priest of Bethel reports Amos to King Jeroboam and tells Amos to go back to Judah, Amos responds that he's not a professional prophet but a shepherd whom God called to prophesy to Israel. Hosea, also prophesying to the northern kingdom, illustrates Israel's unfaithfulness through his own tragic marriage to an unfaithful wife. God commands him to marry Gomer, who bears children with symbolic names: Jezreel, judgment; Lo Ruhamah, no mercy; and Lo Ami, not my people. Despite Gomer's adultery, Hosea is commanded to take her back, illustrating God's enduring love for Israel despite her spiritual adultery with other gods. But storm clouds are gathering in the east. The Assyrian Empire is rising to unprecedented power. Under Tiglath-Pileser III, Assyria begins expanding westward. The small kingdoms of Syria-Palestine are in its path. When Rezin of Damascus and Pekah of Israel form an anti-Assyrian coalition and try to force Judah to join, Judah's king Ahaz appeals to Assyria for help. The prophet Isaiah warns Ahaz to trust God instead, but Ahaz persists. Tiglath-Pileser invades, conquers Damascus, and annexes much of Israel's territory, deporting the population. Only the heartland around Samaria remains of Israel. Hoshea becomes Israel's last king as an Assyrian vassal. But when he stops paying tribute and appeals to Egypt, the Assyrian king Shalmaneser V besieges Samaria. The siege lasts 3 years. In 722 BCE, Samaria falls to Shalmaneser's successor Sargon II. The northern kingdom of Israel is destroyed. Sargon deports 27,290 people to various parts of the Assyrian Empire, scattering the 10 northern tribes. He repopulates the land with people from Babylon, Cutha, Ava, Hamath, and Sepharvaim, mixing populations to prevent rebellion. These immigrants bring their gods, leading to religious syncretism. The biblical writer attributes Israel's fall to persistent apostasy. They worshipped other gods, followed the practices of surrounding nations, built high places, set up sacred stones and Asherah poles, burned incense, and practiced divination. Despite prophets warning them, they rejected God's laws and covenant. Now only Judah remains. Will it learn from Israel's fate? The decades following Jehu's bloody purge witnessed the northern kingdom of Israel entering a period of weakness and vulnerability that will ultimately seal its fate. The Aramean kingdom of Damascus, under the aggressive leadership of Hazael and later his son Ben-Hadad III, systematically dismantles Israel's territorial holdings. The biblical text records that Hazael oppresses Israel throughout the reign of Jehu's son Jehoahaz, reducing Israel's army to 50 horsemen, 10 chariots, and 10,000 foot soldiers. The king of Aram tramples them like dust at threshing time. This is a catastrophic decline for a kingdom that once fielded substantial military forces under Ahab. The oppression grows so severe that Jehoahaz pleads with the Lord for deliverance, and God, seeing Israel's misery, provides a deliverer, though the text doesn't name this figure explicitly, possibly referring to Jehoahaz's son Jehoash, or perhaps the Assyrian pressure on Damascus that eventually relieves Israel. Jehoash, also called Joash, succeeds his father and manages to recover some of Israel's lost territory. The prophet Elisha, now on his deathbed, summons Jehoash for a final prophetic act. Elisha tells the king to take a bow and arrows, then places his hands on the king's hands and commands him to shoot eastward toward Aram, the Lord's arrow of victory over Aram. Elisha declares, promising that Jehoash will completely destroy the Arameans at Aphek. Then Elisha tells him to strike the ground with the arrows. Jehoash strikes 3 times and stops. The prophet becomes angry, explaining that the king should have struck 5 or 6 times, which would have meant destroying Aram completely. Now he will defeat them only 3 times. Shortly after this final prophecy, Elisha dies and is buried. The next spring, Moabite raiders invade the land. Some Israelites, hardly burying a man, see a raiding band approaching. They throw the corpse into Elisha's tomb and flee. When the dead man's body touches Elisha's bones, he comes back to life and stands up, a final miracle, demonstrating that even in death, the power of God's prophet endures. True to Elisha's modified prophecy, Jehoash defeats Ben-Hadad 3 times and recovers the towns Hazael had captured. But Israel's relationship with Judah during this period remains hostile. Amaziah, king of Judah, flushed with victory after defeating Edom, sends a challenge to Jehoash of Israel. "Come, let us face each other in battle." Jehoash responds with a parable mocking Amaziah's presumption. A thistle in Lebanon sent word to a cedar, requesting his daughter for the thistle's son, but a wild beast came along and trampled the thistle. The message is clear. You've had a minor victory over Edom and become arrogant, but you're overmatched. Stay home or you'll bring disaster on yourself and Judah. Amaziah refuses to listen. The 2 Hebrew kingdoms meet in battle at Beth Shemesh in Judah. Judah is routed, and Amaziah himself is captured. Jehoash marches to Jerusalem, breaks down 600 feet of the city wall, and carries off gold, silver, and articles from the temple and palace, along with hostages. This humiliating defeat demonstrates how the divided kingdoms weaken each other while facing external threats that require unity. The reign of Jeroboam II marks Israel's last significant period of prosperity and territorial expansion. Taking advantage of Assyrian preoccupation elsewhere and Aramean weakness, Jeroboam restores Israel's boundaries from Lebo Hamath to the Dead Sea, as prophesied by Jonah son of Amittai. The biblical writer notes this with qualification. Jeroboam does evil in God's sight, maintaining the sins of Jeroboam son of Nebat. Yet God has compassion on Israel's affliction and uses even an unworthy king to relieve their suffering because God has not yet decided to blot out Israel's name. This period of expansion and relative prosperity creates social conditions that the prophets Amos and Hosea condemn with scorching eloquence. Wealth concentrates among the elite while the poor are oppressed. Legal systems corrupt, favoring those who can pay bribes. Religious observance becomes merely external ritual, divorced from ethical behavior. The wealthy lie on beds adorned with ivory, feast on choice lambs and fattened calves, drink wine by the bowlful, and anoint themselves with fine oils, but they don't grieve over the ruin of Joseph. They sell the righteous for silver and the needy for a pair of sandals. Amos, though from Judah, delivers his most pointed messages to the northern kingdom. His prophecies begin by pronouncing judgment on Israel's neighbors: Damascus, Gaza, Edom, Ammon, Moab crimes that would have pleased his Israelite audience. But then he pivots to Judah and finally to Israel itself, the real target of his oracle. The technique traps his audience. They've been agreeing with his condemnations, and now they must hear their own judgment. Amos denounces religious festivals that have become meaningless shows. I despise your religious festivals. Your assemblies are a stench to me. Even though you bring me burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. Away with the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the music of your harps. But let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream. This radical message that God values justice and righteousness more than sacrifice and ritual represents a profound development in Israelite religious thought. Amos also delivers a message of particular terror. He warns that Israel will be destroyed not by the smaller neighboring kingdoms, but by a nation from the far north, and they will be taken into exile beyond Damascus. The people cannot imagine such catastrophe during their time of prosperity. Hosea's prophecy runs in a different emotional register, deeply personal and anguished. His commanded marriage to Gomer the prostitute and her subsequent unfaithfulness becomes a living parable of Israel's relationship with God. Hosea must experience the pain of betrayal, the struggle between judgment and mercy, the tension between what justice demands and what love desires. He names his children with devastating symbolism. Jezreel evokes the sight of Jehu's bloody purge and promises that God will punish Jehu's dynasty for that bloodshed. Lo Ruhamah means not loved or not pitied, indicating God's withdrawal of compassion. Lo Ami means not my people, the ultimate rejection for a covenant people. Yet even amid these names of judgment, Hosea prophesies restoration. God cannot finally abandon Israel despite her adultery. The Lord declares, "How can I give you up, Ephraim? How can I hand you over, Israel? My heart is changed within me. All my compassion is aroused." This tension between judgment and mercy, between God's justice and God's love, creates the emotional power of Hosea's message. He knows destruction is coming. It must come, because Israel has broken covenant. Yet he also knows that destruction cannot be the final word. The political situation deteriorates rapidly after Jeroboam II's death. His son Zechariah reigns only 6 months before Shallum assassinates him, ending Jehu's dynasty in its 4th generation, as predicted. But Shallum himself reigns only 1 month before Menahem kills him and seizes the throne. Menahem rules 10 years, maintaining power through brutality. When the city of Tipsah refuses to open its gates, he attacks it, rips open all the pregnant women, and annexes its territory. During Menahem's reign, a new and terrifying power appears. Tiglath-Pileser III of Assyria, called Pul in the biblical text, invades. Menahem gives him 1,000 talents of silver to secure Assyrian support for his throne, raising the money by exacting 50 shekels from every wealthy man in Israel. This tribute payment makes Israel an Assyrian vassal state, beginning the final countdown to destruction. Menahem's son Pekahiah reigns 2 years before his officer. Pekah assassinates him along with Argab and Ari in the citadel of the palace at Samaria. Pekah reigns 20 years and pursues an anti-Assyrian policy, forming an alliance with Rezin of Damascus. When Ahaz of Judah refuses to join their coalition, Pekah and Rezin march against Jerusalem to force Judah's participation. This Syro-Ephraimite war creates panic in Jerusalem. Isaiah confronts King Ahaz at the end of the aqueduct of the Upper Pool, bringing his son Shear-Jashub, whose name means a remnant will return. The prophet urges Ahaz to remain calm and trust God rather than fear these 2 smoldering stubs of firewood, Pekah and Rezin. Isaiah offers Ahaz a sign, any sign from the depths or heights, but Ahaz piously refuses to test the Lord. Isaiah responds that the Lord will give a sign anyway. A virgin will conceive and bear a son named Emmanuel, meaning God with us, and before the child knows enough to reject wrong and choose right, the lands of the 2 kings Ahaz fears will be laid waste. This famous prophecy becomes central to later messianic interpretation, though its immediate context concerns the Syro-Ephraimite crisis. Despite Isaiah's counsel, Ahaz sends messengers to Tiglath-Pileser with silver and gold from the temple and palace, saying, "I am your servant and vassal. Come up and save me out of the hand of the king of Aram and of the king of Israel who are attacking me." Tiglath-Pileser responds with devastating force. He conquers Damascus, executes Rezin, and deports the population. He invades Israel, capturing Ijon, Abel-Beth-Maash, Genoa, Kedesh, Hazor, Gilead, and Galilee, including all the land of Naphtali. He deports these populations to Assyria. Only the heartland around Samaria remains of Israel's once substantial territory. Archaeological evidence confirms this destruction layer in multiple northern sites dated to approximately 732 BCE. The Assyrian policy of deportation and population replacement aims to prevent rebellion by breaking up ethnic and national identities, mixing populations throughout the empire. Israel has been reduced to a rump state, its population scattered, its territory seized. The handwriting is on the wall. Hoshea son of Elah conspires against Pekah, assassinates him, and becomes Israel's final king. He reigns 9 years as an Assyrian vassal, paying annual tribute to Tiglath-Pileser's successor Shalmaneser V. But Hoshea makes a fatal miscalculation. He sends envoys to So king of Egypt and stops paying tribute to Assyria. When Shalmaneser discovers this treachery, he seizes Hoshea and imprisons him. The Assyrian king then besieges Samaria. The siege lasts 3 years, from 725 to 722 BCE. The defenders hold out desperately, but without relief from Egypt or any other source, their situation becomes hopeless. In 722 BCE, Samaria falls. Shalmaneser dies during the final stages, and his successor Sargon II claims credit for the conquest. Sargon's annals boast, "I besieged and conquered Samaria, led away as booty 27,290 inhabitants of it." The number is specific and probably accurate. It represents the upper classes, military officers, craftsmen, and other valuable personnel. The common people remain in the land but are joined by deportees from Babylon, Cutha, Ava, Hamath, and Sepharvaim, creating a mixed population that becomes the basis for the later Samaritan community. The biblical writer provides a theological explanation for Israel's destruction that goes beyond mere political and military analysis. The text presents Israel's fall as divine judgment for persistent covenant violations. The people worshipped other gods despite constant prophetic warnings. They followed the practices of the nations God had driven out before them. They built high places in all their towns. They set up sacred stones and Asherah poles on every high hill and under every spreading tree. They burned incense as the nations had done whom God carried into exile. They practiced divination and sought omens. They sacrificed their sons and daughters in fire. They sold themselves to do evil, provoking God's anger. When God sent prophets and seers warning them to turn from evil ways and keep the commandments, they would not listen, but stiffened their necks like their ancestors who did not trust in the Lord their God. They rejected God's decrees and covenant and followed worthless idols, becoming worthless themselves. This lengthy explanation emphasizes that destruction didn't come arbitrarily, but as consequence of persistent rebellion despite abundant warning. The mixed population that remains in the former northern kingdom creates religious syncretism that horrifies the biblical writers. The new settlers bring their gods with them. Men from Babylon make Succoth-Beneth, men from Cutha make Nergal, men from Hamath make Ashima, Avites make Nebhaz and Tardak. Sepharvites burn their children as offerings to Adramelech and Anamelech. At the same time, because they don't know how to worship the Lord, God sends lions among them that kill some people. Sargon hears about this and sends back one of the deported priests to teach the settlers how to worship the God of the land. So priest returns to Bethel and teaches them how to worship the Lord. But the people also continue worshiping their own gods. This situation creates the Samaritan community that becomes so contentious in later Jewish history. The northern kingdom of Israel has ceased to exist as a political entity, its population scattered across the Assyrian Empire, its identity diluted by foreign settlers, its religious distinctiveness compromised by syncretism. The 10 northern tribes disappear from history as identifiable entities, becoming the lost tribes of later speculation. Only Judah remains, and its survival seems precarious. The southern kingdom has witnessed its northern neighbor destroyed despite having greater territory, population, and wealth. Judah must now navigate between Egyptian and Mesopotamian powers while maintaining political independence and religious faithfulness. The prophets Isaiah and Micah in Judah interpret Israel's fall as warning. The same fate awaits Judah unless it repents. Micah prophesies that Samaria will become a heap of rubble, and he warns that the same destruction will reach the gate of Jerusalem. Isaiah uses the northern kingdom's destruction as leverage in his warnings to Judah, reminding them that Israel fell because of sin, and Judah walks the same path. The fall of Israel becomes object lesson, prophetic warning, and theological crisis. If God's chosen people can be destroyed and exiled, what does that mean for God's promises? Can covenant be broken? Is judgment final? These questions will haunt Judah for its remaining century and a half, and the prophets will struggle to articulate answers that preserve both divine justice and divine faithfulness, both human responsibility and divine sovereignty. The story of Israel's fall is not just political history, but theological wrestling with the deepest questions of faith, judgment, mercy, and hope. Chapter 12. Judah alone and the Babylonian exile. Judah survives Israel's fall by 2 decades before facing its own existential crisis. King Hezekiah, one of Judah's most righteous kings, initiates sweeping reforms. He removes the high places, smashes the sacred stones, cuts down Asherah poles, and even breaks up the bronze serpent Moses made because the people have been burning incense to it. He rebels against Assyria, refusing tribute. In 701 BCE, the Assyrian king Sennacherib invades Judah in response. The Assyrian army captures 46 fortified cities. Sennacherib's annals boast of shutting Hezekiah up like a bird in a cage in Jerusalem. Hezekiah sends word to Sennacherib at Lachish, admitting he was wrong and offering to pay whatever tribute is demanded. Sennacherib demands 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. Hezekiah strips the silver from the temple and palace, even cutting the gold from the temple door frames he himself had overlaid. But Sennacherib isn't satisfied. He sends a large army to demand Jerusalem's surrender. The Assyrian field commander stands outside Jerusalem's walls and shouts propaganda in Hebrew so everyone can hear. Egypt is an unreliable ally, a splintered reed that will pierce your hand if you lean on it. Don't let Hezekiah deceive you. The Lord himself told us to destroy this land. Has any god of any nation saved its land from Assyria? The people remained silent as Hezekiah commanded. Inside the city, Hezekiah receives the message, tears his clothes, and goes to the temple. He sends officials to the prophet Isaiah, asking for prayer. Isaiah sends back God's word. Do not be afraid. Sennacherib will hear a rumor. Return to his own land, and there I will have him cut down with the sword. Sennacherib sends another threatening message. Hezekiah takes the letter to the temple and spreads it before the Lord, praying, You alone are God over all kingdoms. You made heaven and earth. Now deliver us from Sennacherib's hand, so all kingdoms may know that you alone are God. Isaiah sends God's response. Sennacherib has insulted the Holy One of Israel. He will return by the way he came and not enter Jerusalem. That night, the angel of the Lord strikes down 185,000 in the Assyrian camp. Sennacherib withdraws to Nineveh. One day, while worshiping in the temple of his god, 2 of his sons assassinate him with swords. Jerusalem is miraculously saved. Hezekiah's son Manasseh reverses all his father's reforms. He reigns 55 years, longer than any other Judean king, and is more evil than all who preceded him. He rebuilds the high places, erects altars to Baal, makes an Asherah pole, and worships the stars. He builds altars to foreign gods in the temple courts, sacrifices his own son in fire, practices divination and sorcery, and sets up a carved Asherah pole in the temple itself. He sheds so much innocent blood that Jerusalem is filled from end to end. Prophets declare that God will wipe Jerusalem clean like wiping a dish. Manasseh's son, Amon, continues his father's practices, but reigns only 2 years before being assassinated. His son Josiah becomes king at age 8. In the 18th year of Josiah's reign, during temple repairs, the high priest Hilkiah finds a scroll of the law. When it's read to Josiah, the king tears his robes in distress, realizing how far Judah has strayed. The scroll is probably Deuteronomy or a version of it. Josiah sends officials to inquire of the prophetess Huldah, who confirms that judgment is coming because of Judah's idolatry, but not in Josiah's lifetime because of his repentance. Josiah initiates the most thorough reform in Judah's history. He reads the book of the covenant to all the people and renews the covenant before the Lord. He removes from the temple all articles made for Baal, Asherah, and the stars, burning them outside Jerusalem. He defiles the high places throughout Judah, from Geba to Beersheba. He tears down the quarters of the male shrine prostitutes in the temple. He defiles Topheth in the valley of Hinnom, where children were sacrificed. He removes horse statues dedicated to the sun god and burns chariots dedicated to the sun. He pulls down altars Manasseh built in the temple courts. He travels to Bethel and demolishes the altar Jeroboam made, burning the high place, grinding it to powder, and burning the Asherah pole. He slaughters all the priests of the high places throughout the north. Josiah celebrates Passover, as it hasn't been celebrated since the days of the judges. But despite Josiah's reforms, the momentum toward judgment is irreversible. God declares, "I will remove Judah from my presence as I removed Israel, and I will reject Jerusalem." In 609 BCE, Josiah foolishly tries to intercept Pharaoh Necho, who is marching north to aid Assyria against Babylon. Josiah is killed at Megiddo. His death devastates Judah. The people make his son Jehoash king, but after 3 months, Pharaoh Necho deposes him and installs his brother Jehoiakim as a puppet king. Jehoiakim reigns 11 years as an oppressive and ungodly king. Meanwhile, Babylon has destroyed Assyria and become the new superpower. In 605 BCE, Nebuchadnezzar defeats Egypt at Carchemish, establishing Babylonian dominance. Jehoiakim becomes his vassal but rebels after 3 years. In 597 BCE, Nebuchadnezzar besieges Jerusalem. Jehoiakim dies during the siege, and his 18-year-old son Jehoiachin surrenders after 3 months. Nebuchadnezzar carries him to Babylon along with the queen mother, court officials, army officers, and 10,000 leading citizens, including craftsmen and artisans. He loots the temple treasuries and palace. Only the poorest people remain. Nebuchadnezzar installs Jehoiachin's uncle Zedekiah as king. The prophet Jeremiah has been warning for decades that Babylon is God's instrument of judgment and Judah should submit. He wears a yoke around his neck, symbolizing servitude to Babylon. But other prophets promise deliverance, and Zedekiah wavers. In 589 BCE, encouraged by Egypt, Zedekiah rebels. Nebuchadnezzar returns and besieges Jerusalem for the 3rd time. The siege lasts 2 years. Famine becomes severe. In 587 or 586 BCE, the Babylonians breach the walls. Zedekiah and his army flee at night but are captured near Jericho. Nebuchadnezzar's judgment is brutal. Zedekiah's sons are killed before his eyes. Then his eyes are put out. Blind and in bronze shackles, Zedekiah is taken to Babylon. The Babylonian commander Nebuzaradan burns the temple, the palace, and every important building in Jerusalem. His troops break down the city walls. The remaining people are exiled to Babylon except for the poorest, who are left to work the vineyards and fields. The Babylonians strip everything of value from the temple. The bronze pillars, the movable stands, the bronze sea, and all the bronze, silver, and gold articles. What couldn't be carried away is smashed. The captain of the guard takes the chief priest, his assistant, doorkeepers, court officials, army officers, and 60 prominent citizens to the king of Babylon at Riblah. There Nebuchadnezzar has them executed. Jerusalem is destroyed. The temple is ruins. The Davidic kingdom has ended. The people are in exile in a foreign land. After nearly 400 years, the kingdom of Judah has fallen. The story that began with Abraham's journey to the promised land has seemingly come full circle. The people are again in Mesopotamia, no longer possessing the land, their temple destroyed, their king dethroned. Yet the story doesn't end here. In Babylon, prophets like Ezekiel and the author of Isaiah 40 to 55 proclaim messages of hope. God has not abandoned his people. A remnant will return. The covenant endures. But that belongs to another chapter of Israel's long history. For ancient Israel, the kingdoms, the temple, the land, this is the end. The exiles sit by the waters of Babylon, hang their harps on willows, and weep when they remember Zion, asking how they can sing the Lord's song in a foreign land. The history of ancient Israel spans nearly 2 millennia, from Abraham's journey around 2000 BCE to Jerusalem's destruction in 586 BCE. From nomadic origins to unified kingdom to divided nations to catastrophic exile, it's a story of extraordinary highs and devastating lows. These people created a religious and ethical legacy that transformed world history. The Torah they preserved, the temple they built, the prophets they produced, and the covenant they maintained became foundations for Judaism, Christianity, and Islam traditions that now claim more than half of humanity. What makes ancient Israel's story compelling isn't its military might or territorial expansion. Israel was never a superpower. Its kingdoms were small, often vassals to greater empires. What makes the story remarkable is how a minor people on the margins of great civilizations created ideas that outlived those empires. The moral vision of the prophets, the legal innovations of the Torah, the theological concepts developed in this small land between desert and sea, these rippled across centuries and continents. The story also illustrates timeless human patterns, the struggle between faithfulness and compromise, the corrupting influence of power, the cycle of reform and decline, the tension between particularism and universalism, the question of how to maintain identity in exile. Ancient Israel wrestled with questions that remain urgent. What does justice require? How should communities organize themselves? What happens when religious conviction meets political reality? The destruction of Jerusalem and exile to Babylon seemed like the end. But the Jewish people survived. Their faith deepened rather than destroyed by catastrophe. They returned, rebuilt, and continued their story. The Hebrew Bible they produced became the most influential text in Western civilization. The monotheism they championed became the dominant religious framework for billions. The ethical principles they articulated became touchstones for moral discourse. As you drift towards sleep, perhaps reflect on this. A people who spent more time oppressed than triumphant, who lost their land and kingdom, whose temple was destroyed and cities burned, somehow transmitted a legacy that shaped human history more profoundly than most empires. Their story, preserved in texts compiled during and after exile, testifies to the enduring power of memory, faith, and covenant. Ancient Israel's political history ended in 586 BCE, but its influence was only beginning. Rest now with this epic journey complete, knowing that from these ancient hills and valleys emerged ideas that still echo through our world today.